Hi, I'm your Wegener and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. There have been some interesting developments you will not have read or heard of before that we have to talk about today, so stay tuned for that. At the moment, I'm in the final stages of packing my bags and hopping on a plane tomorrow, flying to a friend of mine in Sydney, and then we're going to drive west for a long time and hopefully see a lot of exciting birds. So far, the packing has been pretty smooth, and I really love my Naya Evo Fjord 60-liter backpack with the large RCI because it so easily fits all my gear. It fits my 600mm prime lens, one R5 Mark II with the battery grip, my R1, and 100-500 plus my laptop and a few batteries. Of course, then it's way more heavy than the carry-on allowance, but fingers crossed I will still make it onto the plane and have no issues at all. And then I also have these small Naya Evo pouches that I just use for hard drives and card readers and stuff like that. So super handy. And if you want to get yourself your own Naya Evo stuff, make sure to check out the discount code I linked for you down there in the description. That gives a special discount just to my followers. And if I run into some trouble, I make sure to remember what you guys told me that Simon said in one of his videos recently, to say 2 words, lithium batteries, and then hopefully that will get me through no matter what. And this is definitely why I usually love to go on road trips, because then I can just throw everything into my car, don't have to think so thoroughly when I'm packing, and I have everything with me. Is that the same for you guys? Do you like going on road trips, or is flying your go-to method when looking for birds somewhere else? This trip will also be really interesting for me and may bring an answer to the question, do I prefer the R5 Mark II or the R1 in the field? Because this is the first time that I will go on a really big trip to a far destination, having both of these camera bodies with me. In fact, I'll probably take 2 R5 Mark IIs and 1 R1. And I know that I will always be tempted in the field when I feel like it's a rarer bird that I might not be able to get as close to grab the R5 Mark II. But at the same time, I just love the R1, love how it handles and how it performs in the field. So I foresee a few moments in the field where I'm definitely torn between using the 2 cameras. And the biggest downside for me personally with the R5 Mark II, at least at the moment, is that it does not shoot in oversampled 4K 60, whereas the R1 does. So if I want higher quality video, I always have to grab the R1, which makes it even harder for me to decide which camera I should be mainly using in the field. So after this trip, I'll hopefully have a better idea what is the best wildlife camera in the Canon lineup, and I think I'll also make a video about the 2 cameras, comparing them and see in which situation I preferred what camera. While I'm away, I'm obviously not able to post as much as I usually do, but I've prepared a few videos for you, one with Dwight where we talk about some really interesting topics, and then also a bird photography show with Glenn. So stay tuned for these, and they will come up around the next couple of weekends. Last week, someone asked me if I could edit one of their photos because they wanted to hang it up really large in their living room, and I said, all right, I'll give it a go. And it was this super interesting image of a pelican flying above this lake with beautiful mountain backdrop and some interesting clouds. Steen had already edited his own version of the image, but he just wasn't quite happy with the overall outcome. And looking at the raw file, I instantly thought about a few tweaks I could make to bring some more overall mood and feel into the image. And interestingly, with this edit, I basically only used the camera raw filter and then radial and linear gradients in camera raw, or you could do the same in Lightroom, to bring some mood and some color in certain areas of the image. First of all, I did a linear gradient at the top of the image to bring some warmth into the sky, and I added a bit of warmth obviously with the white balance slider, and I also added some magenta to give it that more sort of sunsetty or sunrise feeling. And then my other aim was to make the water in front of the bird more blue and bring in more details into those mountains. And then I also removed some of the color from the reflection of the bird to just give it an overall really nice and moody feel. Usually I like my images quite vibrant and contrasty, but here I really tried to find a balance where I still keep that sort of early morning mood with some fog, but at the same time make the subject stand out, make the overall scene feel really nice and moody, but also make that sort of mountain silhouette shine in the background as well. And isn't it interesting how much you can do by basically only using the gradients with the white balance and the tint slider and a little bit of dehaze? And if you guys want to learn all about image editing, learn about an easy to follow workflow that allows you to edit all your raw files with ease, and also hear about all those little dirty tricks and secrets that really make your images stand out, make sure to check out my Lightroom and Next Generation Photoshop Masterclasses down there in the description. I know they will help you a lot to get much better results. In my classes, I teach you step by step in an easy to follow chapters all the tools and techniques to make your own raw files shine and stand out from the crowd. And of course, you won't just be watching because I'm also providing you with my own RAW file so you can edit right alongside me. And if you're not sure if my classes are worth it or the right fit for you, check out the amazing reviews that I've received on a daily basis from many happy students who I've helped to transform their editing lives, who now love editing and get fantastic results every time. So if you want to turn your time in front of the computer from a frustrating chore where you don't really know what image to pick and what slider to pull into a rewarding experience where you have an easy to follow workflow and confidently can edit all your images, make sure to check out my masterclasses down there in the description. This time Canon Rumour posted another crazy lens rumor, an f5.6 200 to 500mm zoom lens. I'm starting to get a little bit tired about talking about all these different rumors and patents coming out because I think most of them will never actually come into reality and will be lenses that we actually hold in our hands. But at the same time, I think it's always interesting to see what these brands are currently working on. And that definitely got me thinking that most brands actually don't have a lens that most of us would like to buy, especially if we're looking for one camera, one lens combination. Because in an ideal world, what I would really want is a fast lens that is also flexible and not too big and heavy. And in an ideal world, it also wouldn't break the bank, but even if it was a bit more expensive, I think an f5.6 lens that is super nice and flexible, works with teleconverters and gets us to at least 600mm would be something that a lot of us would want and pay money for. I'm specifically looking into this topic because I would really like to buy a Sony A7 III to take advantage of the 120 frames per second. But then when I look at the different lens options, I find it hard to pick the perfect lens. Because for action photography, I would need a lens that is fast enough, maybe f4 or 5.6. But then at the same time, I also need a lens that has enough reach. So the most interesting lens overall for me would be the 400 to 800mm lens. That would give me that perfect reach to take a portrait of the bird, but also get it in flight. But then at the same time, that lens is relatively slow at f8. Recently, I've been using the 2.8 300mm lens, but even with the 2x extender, it feels like in many situations that will be a little bit too short for me, even though that lens ticks a lot of boxes, being super light and small weight, working with the teleconverters, and giving me that fast aperture with the fast autofocusing. So would you guys agree that the one lens that seems to be missing from most brands is that fast zoom lens that gets us to 600mm, is not too big and too heavy, and has an aperture of a maximum of f5.6 by hopefully also not breaking the bank. I think Nikon is probably the closest when it comes to having a lineup like that. Currently, they don't have a zoom lens like I'm talking about, but they have their PF lenses that could kind of fit that mold. If you're just looking for that one camera, like a Z8 for instance, with the 600mm PF lens, that could definitely be a nice, easy to carry around combo. But then you don't get the 120 frames a second like I can get in an A9 III, for instance. And now let's talk about something interesting and exciting. A few more specs about the R6 Mark III and a release date. Because from time to time, people whisper things into my ear, and usually whenever something gets whispered into my ear like this, these things have been bang on in the past, like when I first talked about the 200 to 800, or when I said there would be an R6 Mark II long before anyone actually believed me. So of course, any kind of news or rumor before an actual official announcement we have to take with a grain of salt, but I'm quite confident that what I will be saying now is accurate. And interestingly, it seems like that the R6 Mark III is not imminent. There will be an announcement probably in Q4 of 2025. And what I found the most interesting is that it said that the camera would get a megapixel bump. So it wouldn't be 24 megapixel anymore and something more than that. Which I thought was very interesting because that could instantly make the R6 Mark III also an R5 Mark II killer, especially if it's a cheaper camera with maybe somewhere in the 30 megapixel range. Because I think for many people that 30 megapixel range still feels like the sweet spot. Would you agree? But that got me thinking, if Canon really gives a megapixel bump to the R6 Mark III and to be able to differentiate it from the R5 Mark II, does Canon then maybe not give the R6 Mark III a stacked sensor and rather a fast readout non-stacked sensor that probably would have a very high image quality even at those high ISO levels? I can definitely see that being the case, and I think I wouldn't even be totally opposed to it. The stacked sensors are nice, but they also come with some drawbacks, especially when it comes to the image quality. Now for video, it would be nice to have no rolling shutter at all or very little rolling shutter, But if it's true that the camera gets more megapixels, I think it not being a stacked sensor would be a lot more likely. Would you actually be happy with an R6 Mark III that has more megapixels but a non-stacked sensor? I think for many people, this could actually make it a super interesting camera, especially if it still comes in below that $3,000 price point, because it would suddenly give us such a great all-around camera that would also be fantastic for nature photography and would have a little bit more scope for cropping. An announcement in Q4 2025 would be exactly 3 years after the R6 Mark II was announced, and I think that would make a lot of sense, even if the camera only starts shipping maybe in 2026. This week, Sony released quite a controversial camera, the FX2 cinema camera that has the Sony A7V sensor. And while some people said it's a great addition to the lineup, there's also a lot of negative feedback where people felt like it's just not a camera that is enough of an upgrade, especially at the price bracket it currently sits in. In America, it only costs slightly more than an A7 IV, whereas in Australia, it costs almost $2,000 more than an A7 IV camera. One thing I was thinking though is that it makes a lot of sense that Sony pushed out this camera now with the old A7 IV sensor before releasing an A7 V probably later this year. And if we go by Sony Alpha rumors, it seems likely that in the next 3 to 4 months, we will see a few more Sony cameras and potentially also an A7 V, which I think would be very interesting for nature photographers if it can get the latest autofocusing, hopefully more frames per second, maybe pre-capture, and still also have a nice good sensor in that sort of 30 megapixel range. So all around, I think this would be an interesting camera. And now the timeline also makes a bit more sense that we haven't heard anything about the A7 V yet, because Sony would have wanted to push out this FX2 with the old sensor first before introducing another camera with a newer, hopefully upgraded sensor. When I come back from my road trip sometime in July, I will also be getting a Nikon Z52 and a Z5 II to take into the field with me and do some reviews for all of you guys. And I think these cameras are actually quite interesting because they're both fairly on the sort of cheaper end of the spectrum while still offering apparently some great performance in the field. And so I thought that's definitely something that I would want to try out and share with all of you, because these cameras could also be a fantastic step into the Nikon lineup and giving you access to their fantastic lenses. And if we go by the sales figures in Japan, the release of the Z5 II has definitely helped Nikon to push up sales quite substantially, which is great to see, and I'm definitely looking forward to using that camera. Speaking about Nikon, it has also now become reality that most of the prices for all the lenses, not cameras, that are produced in China have gone up quite substantially. And some of my favorite lenses like the 600mm PF lens now cost a few $100s more in the US market, which is definitely a shame to see, but I guess at the moment there's nothing else that we can do about it. And hopefully, at least for the rest of the world, I hope that the prices here will stay the same and don't just also edge higher just because the American prices are going up. And on that note, I think it's time for me to wrap up this video now, go pack my bags, and I would love to hear from you guys in the comments all your thoughts about this video, a potential R6 Mark III. So let me know all the thoughts in the comments, give me a thumbs up for the video, check out my channel membership at Masterclasses, and of course, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in another video very soon. Bye!